a lot of angry people, Alex, in the chat. And I'm sure a lot of angry people in both of our Twitter mentions right now as well. And everybody in Patriot land, I'm sure if we turned on the 98.5 right now, Alex, everybody on the caller lines and things like that would be going nuts as well. I don't know. I don't want to like sound like a Patriots apologist and come at it from that angle, but I guess it's where do the Patriots go from here? I think is really the only way we can. I don't want to yet take the flame and the flamethrower to the front office, right? Because it's still so early in the process. There's still a long way to go. But if you're the Patriots to replace J.C. Jackson, are you going out and using the money you were going to give J.C. to sign 2 veteran corners and trying to fill the gaps that way? Or would you really like to see them turn their attention to the draft?
Both. I'd go 1-1. I said it before. I'll say, I think you draft, you're going to have to hit on a pick. And I know I say that and everybody kind of tenses up a little bit because, oh boy, here we go again. Right. You're going to have, because the reality is it's not like there's somebody waiting who's a year away, right? It's not like they need a stopgap for a year. If they had a young corner, like when Butler left, right? And they had Gilmore and then they had, J.C. Jackson, we didn't know. Yeah, he had a decent first year. We didn't know if he was truly like a 70, 80% snap guy or not. But it was like, you know what? If they can just get a 1-year stopgap, somebody to split the snaps, they'll be fine. They went out, they signed Jason McCourty. Like, that would be great, right? That'd be excellent. That's not the case right now. That's not. You don't have that guy. So I think you need to go into the draft, try to hit on a kid, and then you get a veteran on a 1-year deal, and then you reevaluate. Because the other thing is, and maybe this is wishful thinking here, and I'm going to throw a lot of what ifs out there. Like, this is very hypothetical, very everything going their way. If they hit on it, let's say they do that, right? They go veteran draft, call it Andrew Booth, Joe Hayden, because those have been the names that have been in my head all day. Let's say they hit it. Let's say they hit it, and Andrew Booth is amazing, right?
Yes.
Well, all of a sudden now you know what you're looking for.
Right.
So then what are the odds they could go back next year and hit again? So I'm not investing in any of these veterans in free agency. I just don't think it's that. That's the other thing about this. It's not a great class. If Carlton Davis was still out there, I'd be pounding the table for Carlton Davis right now. Give him essentially slightly less than JC's deal. If you have to give him 5 years, give him 5 years, a young guy. Right. I think what you do is you draft a guy, sign a veteran, don't commit. Sign a veteran, because if you have to go year by year at one corner spot, that's fine. Just don't end up going year by year at both. And you talk about signing 2 veterans, the class isn't there for that to work. The players aren't available for that to work unless they're going to swing something massive, unless somebody who we don't know is available suddenly becomes available. So I'm rambling now. Draft a kid, small commitment to a veteran, cross your fingers.
That's where it seems like we're at. And I think this is the biggest second guess of this entire thing from Bill Belichick's perspective with the front office and the decisions they made here with J.C. Jackson. They're no longer thinking progressively in my mind or forward thinking as much anymore than I would like to see, because the move here from the Patriots side of things was to franchise tag J.C. Jackson, right? That was the move. The move was to tag Jackson, allow him to play on the tag. You draft your Kyer Elam in the second round or late first round, and then you allow that guy to then take over for JC in 2023. It's okay that you don't want to give JC Jackson 5 years, $82.5 million. I don't think that anybody should have a real issue with the fact that the Patriots didn't want to go there. The issue that that people should have with the Patriots is that they did not progressively think about this hole that was about to be open. And now they're putting themselves in a situation where you're either going to have a young player starting and playing a ton of games, or you're going to have a veteran corner like a Jalen Mills, like a Rasul Douglas, like a Darius Williams, like a Kyle Fuller, whichever name you want to use, that's in over his head. At least one. And if you have one of those guys being your number one, and then Jalen Mills is now your number 2, then 2 guys are technically in over their heads a little bit, right? So that's the biggest problem, or the biggest second guess that I have with this is the move. You knew J.C. Jackson was going to get paid. You knew you weren't going to be the ones to pay him. Fine. Then the move was to kick this can down the road to next season to buy yourself some more time. because you didn't draft a corner early last year. You paid Jalen Mills in free agency, but you knew he wasn't a number one guy. This offseason should have been the focus of let's find the next guy behind JC, just like they did with Stephon Gilmore, right? They found JC Jackson, right. They developed JC, they made him into the next guy. I'm not ready to crown Shaun Wade. I don't think Shaun Wade is that dude, right? I mean, JC was at least showing early on with Gilmore how good he was. Like, that's not right. The guy. So now I think we're in a position where you are in a very, very tough spot going into the rest of free agency in the offseason, where you're probably either going to have a rookie in a very, very pivotal role in your secondary, or you're going to have a veteran player that really doesn't deserve to be the top guy on your depth chart being in that spot. And you all you could have done was tag JC, and you would have gotten him for a discount. Like, quite frankly, $17.3 million is a discount for JC Jackson at this point, and the Patriots didn't do it. And that's one thing I can't necessarily figure out. The only argument that I can make for the fact that they didn't do that is maybe they felt like that was tying up too much money in their cap, because when you sign a guy to a franchise tag and it's $17.3 million, he counts for $17.3 million against your cap. So that would have been it. They wouldn't have been able to do anything else at that point. I think that's probably going to be the argument that they make.
I think that could have been it. They didn't have many needs. You bring back, like, on top of that, what do you have to do? Bring back Devin McCourty, which I think they could have made work, right?
Right.
And then really, linebacker and tackle you can address through the draft.
Right. McCourty, Slater, Hoyer, which they could have probably done anyways. And then, as you said, all the other things get pushed towards the draft.
Right. And then, but then you talk about, tackle still maybe if you swing it a certain way, maybe becomes a luxury need, at least for this year. Then linebackers, your only desperate need. You can bump wide receiver up. You kind of hit on it before. I do want to bring it up. We talked about this a lot when Gronk left, right? Replacing Rob Gronkowski, that there just was a lack of urgency for his departure, and they didn't draft a tight end for whatever it was, 10 years, something like that.
Right.
This is the bigger point for me. It's not a failure. Like, this was inevitable. It was a failing to prepare that set this up, in that, going back to the drafts, you said they didn't draft a corner high last year. They didn't draft a corner at all.
Yeah.
And they only had one UDFA. I get they had a bunch of veterans on the roster. I would have brought in they could have figured out a way to bring in a UDFA. The year before that, when you knew Gilmore was kind of on shaky ground, you didn't know if he was going to play 2021. They had, I think this is 10 picks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 picks. No corners. No corners. 3 linebackers, 2 tight ends, no corners. The year before that, Juwan Williams in the second round. The year before that, Duke Dawson in the second round.
I think that's probably where we can have the issue of where they missed on this, right?
So that's it. So they started missing. Started missing, and they just stopped taking guys. That's not like they needed to keep going. They needed to keep going. They just kind of shut it down and said, you know what, we're not going to add anybody. They could have taken corners on day 3. They have so much success developing guys at that position. Look at where JC came from. That just for them to not add, even as a UDFA, over the last 2 years, right? So Jalen Mills is really the only corner they brought in the building.
They brought in Miles Bryant.
Miles Bryant, thank you, in the slot. Right. Yeah, Miles Bryant, you're right, correct. And then Shaun Wade last year, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Yeah. You knew this day was they knew this day was coming for probably 2 years, and they didn't do anything to address it.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me today. Is you can second guess the Patriots if you want on the fact that they weren't willing to give that contract to JC Jackson, but that's not where I'm at. I'm second guessing the Patriots because they did not have the foresight to prepare for the fact that they knew that they were not going to pay JC Jackson, because this is a thing that started at the combine when they made that 3-year, $51 million offer to JC. They knew at that point in time that they were not going to match that market. They knew it right then and there that they were not going to be in the sweepstakes for JC, at least on a long-term deal. And they had until the other day to franchise tag him, right? They had until last Wednesday to place the tag on him. So they had that period of time to sit there and say, okay, well, we're not going to reach this long-term deal. We'll tag him. We'll bring him back next year. We'll play it out. We'll draft a couple corners, and then we'll have some guys in the back of the depth chart to then hopefully rise up a little bit more. And they
Yeah.
didn't go that route. And that's the part of it that I can't really figure out.
Well, and this is something they were so good at in the past, staying ahead of these personnel things, right? Just when a guy left, there was almost always another guy there ready to go. And this is obviously there's just one other instance where that didn't happen. But one, it's kind of a unique position to have somebody ready and waiting. And they rectified it within a year. They did. So maybe they'll do that again at corner, but they only needed one guy. They didn't need two. So it's, it's just something that to me is why it's so shocking. Like, I don't mean this to come off as me bashing them. It's almost just raw surprise because this is something that, move on from the player a year too early, not too late, be prepared, next man up, all of that.
Right.
They've been so good at that for 20 years. And again, outside of Brady, which is honestly a unique situation.
Right.
This really feels like the first, like, when else have they lost? I guess Gronk, where they lost a player and just there was no clear in-house option next up. It doesn't happen here a lot.
Right. So this actually reminds me more, to go back a little ways, this reminds me more of Asante Samuel, because
right, like we said earlier in the show,
they tagged Asante Samuel, and we talked about this when it happened, when we did the tag show last week. The Patriots did tag Asante Samuel, and then Samuel walked the year after he played on the franchise tag. The 07 season, Asante Samuel played on the franchise tag. When they allowed Asante Samuel to walk after the 07 season, there was a dearth of cornerback talent really between 2008 to 2013 when they finally made that trade for Aqib Talib, or 2012 was the Talib trade, right? 2012.
I think it was 11.
It's 12. Deadline.
12? Okay.
They made the Aqib Talib trade in 2012. So that team in 11 makes the Super Bowl against the Giants as one of the worst defenses in NFL history to make a Super Bowl. I think they were the 31st or 32nd ranked pass defense in the league that year, and they made the Super Bowl because of their offense. That time period, there was clearly a lack of, we had, guys like Sterling Moore and what do you say, Earthwind Moreland and whatever, these other freaking guys, Hank Poteet, Julian Edelman's playing defense at times, right? He's playing slot corner because of who they have out there. And we saw what it looked like. They couldn't get over the hump. Not even Brady and Gronk and that offense in 11 that set all sorts of records could get them over the hump against the Giants in the Super Bowl. And that's where it sort of feels like they're headed again, because they allowed Asante Samuel to walk for the same reasons probably they let J.C. Jackson walk today. I think in a lot of ways, Bill Belichick probably looked back at that Asante situation with J.C. and said, yeah, this is kind of a comparable player. This is kind of the same sort of deal. And here we go again. But I felt like they had sort of reinvented themselves, where they went Talib, then they went Revis, then they went Malcolm Butler, then they went Gilmore, then they went JC, right? They had a guy really in place for the last decade, since 2012, that was ready to take that mantle, and they never really were without it. They were never without a number one corner throughout that stretch. And now we feel like we're going back towards that. And we've seen what that looks like. Even with Brady, he had a tough time winning with that kind of defense. And now we have to go down that road with a second-year quarterback. It is worrisome. It is why we have so many people in the chat that are freaking out right now, because we remember what those defenses looked like from 2008 to 2012. And then we also remember in 2012, when Aqib Talib got here at the deadline, how much of a difference that made. It made an immediate difference, right? The light kind of switched on at that point. Then they get Revis in 14 and they win a Super Bowl. So the lack of foresight, the lack of planning for this J.C. Jackson departure has put the Patriots back into a secondary where I feel like we're going to be right back into that 2010, 2011 Patriot defense, where that secondary was held together by duct tape. And it was not a defense that was Super Bowl caliber. They were getting carried there by the offense.
Thanks for watching our content of the 6-time Super Bowl champion New England Patriots. Please subscribe to my podcast, Patriots Beat, on our YouTube channel, Patriots Press Pass, or wherever you get your podcasts for a lot more exclusive content right here on the CLNS Media Network.